Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to a special Scottish football show. A bit of a impromptu one here, with just a bit of breaking news that came out today, and we thought we'd jump on and have a bit of a chat about it. Something we're kind of hoping to do going forward with the Scottish football shows, kind of bring you these sort of breaking news update podcasts when stuff happens. And with me to discuss the latest breaking news of the new television deal that has just been signed, I have Robert. Robert, how are we doing?
Oh, listen, I'm delighted to be on. Loads of stories today breaking, obviously, that, as you mentioned, the TV deal being the biggest one, but a couple of other bits and pieces to chew through over the next sort of 20, 30 minutes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, place to start to get stuck right in, of course. Today it has been announced that the SPFL have reached an agreement with Premier Sports to air 20 Scottish Premiership games starting from next season, over the course of the next 5 seasons. That's obviously alongside the current Sky Sports deal, which shows 60 games. So I suppose, first of all, your immediate reaction to it, you're going to get 80 games a season now televised, which is, I think, the most we've ever had. So, just your instant reaction to the news as it broke.
Listen, it's a massive positive in terms of exposure for the league and our game as a whole. Premier Sports already have the League Cup. They sponsor that. They show a lot of the Scottish Cup games as well. I think Emma Dodds had maybe teased this a little bit during the Scotland coverage the other day as well, that the news was going to break. So I was wondering what it was going to be. No real details in terms of the game package itself, but more money into the clubs, which is always welcome. And as I say, more exposure, hopefully around the globe as well. So I think it's a positive. Once we maybe delve into the numbers a little bit more, I'm sure we'll dispel that. But no, as I say, on the face of it, it's good news. And as you say, we spoke at length during last season about games that were, maybe blockbuster not being televised. So hopefully that sort of helps bridge that gap as well.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think that's the part, and I'm seeing a few comments flying in here, and I will bring them up as we get onto the talking points in terms of the sort of finances and all that sort of stuff, and people's views on the actual channel itself that it's on, which is another interesting factor because other parties were reportedly interested in it. I think most of us might have hoped, Robert, and it might have went to a TNT Sports maybe, rather than a Premier, just on the basis that I think Premier, obviously they offer they've got the exclusive rights to the League Cup, or the Premier Sports Cup as it's known. They obviously have the co-holders for the Scottish Cup as well, which I suppose does provide us a little bit of extra cash with them doing that, but they do have a reputation, shall we say, for maybe not providing the best analysis, if you will, the best sort of overall coverage when it comes to the game. I think, apart from Rory Stewart, who I think is arguably the best commentator in Scotland right now.
Hamilton, sorry, you've amalgamated the both of them there.
That's exactly what I've done. Rory Hamilton, rather, yes. God, it's because somebody was mentioning Stewart in my head that gets stuck there. Rory Hamilton, obviously the best commentator in Scotland. I think most people would agree, but on the other hand, that does mean dealing more with the likes of Michael Stewart and Stevie Cragen and the like, which William doesn't appear very happy with.
Listen, I don't think, this sort of criticism is exclusive to Premier Sports. I mean, you just have to look at the reaction for the Champions League the other night. Rio Ferdinand was getting absolutely hammered for his lack of insight, shall we say, during the extended coverage they had there. So, as I say, you're going to pick holes. You could pick holes in pretty much all the broadcasters in terms of who they bring on and who they choose to speak to the public during these games. So, unless it's a Monday Night Football, Carragher and Neville, which is obviously elite level. I personally have to say I quite enjoyed when BT Sport had the Scottish stuff. I thought they really packaged the league up well, presented it well. Okay, you can argue about Chris Sutton and Craig and the like, but I really thought they gave it the airtime as well. I'm really hoping Premier Sports do that. when you tune into a game, maybe get an hour of build up and some more sort of VT and interviews, etc. I think that's really important to sort of show off the game rather than maybe what Sky do and jump on a game on a Sunday, show you the highlights for the day before, and then 15 minutes before kick-off they decide to have a wee chat about it. So as I say, you can pick holes in anything. All we have to agree is that it's great news in terms of it's more exposure for the league, and then maybe at some point we can then start discussing like a Netflix style platform where it's maybe more subscription based. But at the minute, as I say, it only was on the table for the league. Neil Doncaster in the past has been how can I say, lackluster in terms of getting drumming up interest for the leagues. So this can only be a good thing, I think. And Premier Sports as well should be commended because they've come in, as you say, for all three competitions now. So they obviously see a market for it, and certainly hopefully they can push it on to another level.
Hopefully, yeah. James Alexander there, Ian Crocker is a better commentator. Well, listen, I mean,
James Alexander's at the wind-up. That has got to be a wind-up comment because there's no way, nothing comes near Rory Hamilton in terms of the Scottish game. Absolutely not.
I mean, listen, each to his own. And listen, I don't think Ian Crocker's a bad commentator by any means. I think he's okay, but Rory Hamilton he makes these occasions, they just feel bigger with his level of commentary and the excitement levels that he brings to it. I mean, I think go and watch back some of the highlights packages for our Europa League run, for example. I mean, he made a lot of that buzz with his commentary. It was for him and Ali McCoist were outstanding during that. So you've got to give him credit. I mean, in terms of obviously the spread of games being shown, we have on this show, Robert, throughout this season, banged our head against a brick wall about the disgrace that is the fact that Sky Sports have showed just one Edinburgh derby out of the last 7 available to them to show, which is totally unacceptable. And we said it, that can't continue. That's our second biggest derby. And in no other country would the second biggest derby in that country be totally ignored, basically. This deal will open that door for Hibernian and for Hearts, and for those games to be broadcast properly as they should be, and that has to be a real positive, not just for them as clubs, but for Scottish football as a whole, to shine a light on those other derbies, because obviously I think the understanding is the old firm will still remain with Sky Sports, meaning you will be looking at, I think hopefully 4 Edinburgh derbies in that 20, maybe a Dundee derby, a New Firm derby. I mean, it just gives an opportunity there to showcase the other offerings that we've got in Scottish football. I
think as well the clubs have some part to play in this, in terms of, I think there was an agreement about number of games that that you can be shown from each club, so that's played a hand in it. What I will say is, you touch on the fact that Edinburgh derbies weren't shown. You look at the last day of the season, the relegation stuff, none of those games, and the playoff place decide, I should have said, none of those games televised as well. So it's about, as I say, you've got to maximise your opportunity. I think the split brings a bit of excitement, certainly at the bottom end for sure. And if that's going to be shown on the final day of the season, you need to televise these games to again attract that interest. Wilf Marshall saying there, that's 3 separate subscriptions to watch, Scottish Premier League football, which is scandalous. I would say you would only need the 2 from Sky and Premier Sports. I don't know where the other one's coming in per se, but yeah, certainly. If you're going to watch the football, you're going to pay the money. It's as simple as that. It's always been the way, whether it's English football, Scottish football. England's got TNT and Sky showing their games as well. So it's just the way of the modern world. Unfortunately, I think you need to. I think there's more positives than negatives.
Well, I think maybe part of the point Will's making there, and I think it's a fair one. You look at. Okay, fair enough. Listen. For clarity, Wilf, my uncle is an Aberdeen fan, and I'm very well aware that Aberdeen and Dundee United has always been referred to as, I've always known it as the New Firm derby, because
you call it what you want, Connor. Call it what you want, mate.
Yeah, I mean, but I suppose that the point is though, right? If you're one of the teams who are playing in Europe, right, So next season, we know group stage football wise, Rangers, Celtic, and Hearts will definitely be in group stage football. Potentially, you might see if Kilmarnock can qualify, or St Mirren. Unlikely as that is, then you could see 4, possibly 5, but certainly 3. And the option that you've got there, I think, to Will's point, it's the European games. If as a Rangers fan, right, as we all are, we want to watch Rangers across the season, you're going to need those 3 subscriptions. Now, technically, you need that anyway, because the League Cup doesn't get shown anywhere else, which is another debate in and of itself, because I can remember a time where you did get League Cup games on the BBC, and that doesn't happen anymore. So, that might be something looking at, but there is a real expense to it, because you're looking at $14.99 for a Premier Sports subscription. Sky Sports, at the cheapest deal you might get, £25, and it's about £28 to £30 for TNT. So it's a lot of money.
No, it is. As you said, that's one of the comments there about other ways of digesting your football, which we won't delve into too much. But look, this is going to. There's no other way around it. You can't have your cake and eat it, as they say. How else are we meant to grow the game if we don't, go for these, extended TV packages? So it always is the expense of the punter, the paying supporter, whether that's in the ground in terms of European ticket packages, or outside the ground in terms of TV deals, etc. So it's not being forced upon you by any means. But certainly, I think a lot of people will pay the money and get the package in, because Scottish football is really well supported. I think Neil Doncaster had said, in terms of head of population, we're one of the, if not the biggest, in terms of getting attendances into the ground. So it's within our own nation a really well respected product. Everyone wants a piece of it, whether it's listening to a podcast every day of the week, or whether it's tuning into games come the weekend. So I dare say Premier Sports people will already have it anyway, because if they're following the national team, or indeed, as you say, following the cup competitions, then they'll have that, or they'll have someone they can go to, or someplace they can go to watch these games as well. So I think once it comes down to the nitty gritty, people will step up, people will pay the money, but it just depends on what package in terms of the games they've got. As you say, if they've got derby games and games of high importance, then people will pay the money regardless.
Certainly, that is true. Obviously, there are other options out there as well, as has been mentioned, and people know what those options are. But in terms of the financial side of things, then, what's your making of the fact that this is a deal that's reported to be worth a minimum of £10 million over the course of the 5 years? Now, I don't know what they mean by a minimum. I don't know if that means there's scope for it to increase potentially. I guess maybe that if depending on how many viewers are getting to watch these games and how it picks up traction wise might help. But looking at it, £10 million across 5 seasons, as Paul McCorrickle comes in here, Robert, it's £150,000 per club. Now, I imagine that's partly due to the fact that, as we said, the big game isn't going to be on there in the Old Firms. But even at that, have we been guilty of underselling ourselves again? Compare it to Sky. I said to you before we come on, with the numbers you crunched up, Sky were averaging about £50 million across 5 years for 20 games. So even if you took 4 Old Firm games in there, you're still probably taking them out of the equation, looking at 20 million at least. So do you think we could have got more out of the deal, or is that about as much as we could have got?
Well, it comes back to who's in and who's willing to pay. If you've only got one suitor, then you've only got one offer on the table. 150 grand to everyone, probably bar Rangers and Celtic, is probably going to be welcome money that they didn't have set aside for the budget before this was announced. So in terms of Neil Doncaster, we're all at odds with Neil Doncaster. I don't think that there's a very few positives you could say about his tenure at the top table. So it's a really difficult one. But he's obviously celebrating the deal itself. I think he said no choice of words, extremely grateful to Premier Sports for their increased investment in the game, which will bring an additional 8-figure sum into Scottish football over the next 5 years, meaning further record-breaking payments to the club. I don't know if he's trying to dress that up. We've just said there ourselves, 150k per season to each team isn't a great deal of money, but I dare say clubs down the bottom will welcome it.
Yeah, well, listen, I would imagine that some of the clubs down the bottom certainly would welcome it. I'm just going to read you here just an excerpt of what Neil Doncaster has said, or certainly that's been reported he said. So Neil Doncaster has said, "This is tremendous news for the SPFL clubs and supporters alike, and means that up to 80 Premiership matches will be broadcast live next season across Sky Sports and Premier Sports. This will be the highest number of live matches ever broadcast from the Scottish Premiership. With Premier Sports already having the rights to the Premier Sports Cup and the Scottish Cup, they've cemented their place as a key broadcaster of live Scottish football. We're extremely grateful to Premier Sports for their increased investment into the game, which will bring an additional 8-figure sum into Scottish football over the next 5 years, meaning further record-breaking payments to clubs." Now, pretty much a standard statement you would expect from Neil Doncaster to say there. I must admit, I'd like to have heard a bit more, maybe we will in the days to come, regarding the financial side, because we know that they did say, Neil Doncaster and the likes, that the plan was at some point to get up to £50 million a season for Scottish football. Now, you're getting 30 million a season in effect for Sky. This will add about 2 million a season for Premier Sports. So it doesn't really take us a hell of a lot further towards that 50 million. It just means it's now 32 million a season as opposed to 30. And even then, that distribution, as we see, the dynamics of that can change depending on the clubs. So, I mean, yes, the lower clubs will be glad for a bit of extra cash, but again, does it just go towards the fact that we are still underselling our product? Because we look at the EFL in England, 900 million quid. That deal next season, moreover, which is probably the bigger point, Robert, the WSL in England next season is going to be getting a deal worth more than the Scottish football, even with this additional broadcaster coming on. So where is that going wrong? Because why couldn't we have got 20-25 million pound out of this deal?
I think you can trace it as far back to the whole Setanta collapse, to be honest, because at that point we just took whatever we could, because clubs were absolutely petrified that nothing would come in, and then from there, no one really had the guts to stand side by side and say, no, we don't want this, because the fear of having nothing, equates greater than the fear of having everything. You look at some of the quotes coming in there. You mentioned the WSL. Collins mentioned the Belgian league. I think the Eredivisie was mentioned as well. Our biggest problem, I think, in selling a product is England's our neighbour. I really do. I think everyone compares our football to theirs, which brings its own sort of problems. So, but for you to say there that WSL is going to be getting more of a TV deal than the Scottish Premiership is quite outstanding, really, given what does it bring? Because in terms of crowd, in terms of viewers, it's point nothing in comparison. So I find that really, really baffling. And again, it's going to take a bigger step from the clubs themselves to say no. I think someone mentioned they're like an Amazon type deal, and these are all great on paper, but without the clubs backing and the clubs having the bravery to say, do you know what, we deserve more, we want more, and if that means a season with nothing, or a season, where they stream on their own services to then get a better product, then so be it. But if you don't make a change, then then nothing changes. Do you know what I mean? So, but Neil Doncaster, and just like you said there about the financials and bringing them out, I don't think he's been one to over egg that, in the sense that he seems to put the numbers out and doesn't make a great deal hiding their hair of them. He just sort of sparks the numbers out, and we've got to swallow it. So as punters were saying there, he's on a massive wage. Is he earning? It's probably a different podcast, but I think while he's at the helm, we're not going to edge near that goal of 50 million a season. I don't see it happening, because he's quite happy to take whatever comes on offer. We had a league's campaign with no sponsor, and the deal when it came back in was not anything to talk about either. So, as I say, it's really difficult when you don't trust the man in charge.
Well, exactly. And Perry coming in with $4.99 there. Super chat. Thank you very much, Perry. He has actually added his comment down here. I think he's just forgot to add the chat, but he said this is meant to be for it. So Perry saying that the problem we've got is we don't market our best product well enough. Old seating arrangement adds value to the neutral and therefore value to the TV deal. The Eredivisie share 200 million euros, us 30 million. And that's a worthy point across Europe, because even Colin here as well saying it, that the Belgian league is a deal that's worth £100 million a season. I mean, are the Eredivisie and the Belgian league really worth, between 70 and £100 million more than us?
No, but the issue there is they'll have negotiated these steps in terms of increments through deals through the years. As I say, we just took the crumbs off the table when Satanta went bust, and therefore, if you're paying X, the network provider's not going to jump to Y, straight away. There's got to be some sort of challenge or bidding war, if you want, if you're going to try and raise the price of it. But certainly, it's very difficult. When you're sitting here comparing different deals and without knowing the ins and outs. All I can say is, on the face of it, for this deal, it's a bit more money into the league. It's more exposure, which I think's key, because if you get more exposure, then you may get other networks interested come the renewal point. As long as these deals marry up, so they both end at the same time, because you don't want to be lumbered with one round your neck when you're trying to negotiate the bigger package as well. So, but no, as I say, I think, we can talk about money and we can talk about Neil Doncaster, but as I say, on the face, I think it's a positive. And I think it's something, we'll see how it goes. But you touch on the coverage itself. That's where the punters will be put off in terms of who's in the hot seat, Craig or Michael Stewart in particular.
Yeah. Well, in terms of that, what are you kind of looking for then from it? Because when the BT Sport deal was there, and I thought that was quite good. I must say, and especially this in the positive, is that if it's anything like the way the BT one was, you had a game basically every weekend being shown, and that's important because you look at this season and last season as well. There are sometimes 2-3 weeks where there's no SPFL game being shown on Sky Sports, even when there's not maybe cup games or international breaks on. Because obviously they pick and choose, and they've got their quotas for how many times they need to go to a certain ground a season and all that kind of shebang. And I must say that having the ability with that other broadcaster, if it goes the way that BT did, you'll have that, so that'll be a positive. But I'm also thinking as well, and I don't know if they'll do this, maybe they will, but you'll remember the BT deal, they actually done their own Scottish football show as well.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Where you had Darryl Curry hosting it with usually him, Chris Sutton and Alan McCoist, and now, whatever people's feelings towards either of them are, I certainly think their dynamic was a lot better together than the current one with Sutton and Boyd, for example, in Sky Sports. I think they had that. They also had the debates as well where they got other people involved, guys like Alec Ray, were regular contributors to it as well. Do you expect, or would you like to see something like that coming back again as well? Because, Darryl Curry is a presenter for Premier Sports, although he's been out sick for a long time. So if he's back, did he do something like that?
100%. They have to. They should be jumping all over that because it's missing. You mentioned, obviously, we've got sports scene for the highlights, but just a general sort of magazine show, as it were, where they're sort of maybe, I don't know, going up to McDermott and speaking to the chairman, or up at Den speaking to the captain, just things like that, things away from match day, give us a bit more insight and a bit more of a look into each club. I think that's really important. Even if it's you see nowadays bringing fans into a studio and having fans speaking, just different ideas. I think it needs something. As I say, a magazine type show goes down well, but you've got to bring the right level of insight. It's no good just having Alan Hutton and Kenny Miller talking for half an hour about what they've seen in a match. I just think that we can do a little bit more than that.
No, absolutely. And I think, I remember Wilf actually, we done a special podcast about the mainstream media in Scottish football. Wilf had picked that up, that when you looked at the BBC, for example, there was only one non-football and sort of like on the pitch show around Scottish football, and that was also a view for the terrace. What those guys do, which they were obviously adapted from YouTube, as they were initially. Which, by the way, BBC, if you want to pick us up, you'll happily negotiate a deal with you. But certainly that sort of thing helps to generate that buzz. You look what they do down south, as you mentioned there. They've got things like the overlap that they do quite regularly. They do the fan debates. They obviously replaced Soccer AM with the Saturday Social, which brings that, more authentic feel, because, okay, a lot of these guys that go in there are YouTubers, but they're representing fan bases from that kind of point of view, so it helps. And you'd like to think that something like that could continue in that vein with Premier Sports. Just last one at Robert, to sort of come back to the more positive side. As we said, 80 games a season. Very, very positive, without doubt. In your mind, though, with the fact that the Old Firm derby is obviously going to be exclusive to Sky, is this a case that Premier Sports basically market themselves all about the focus on the Edinburgh derby and showcasing the best of the rest of Scottish football? Because there has been some cracking games this season. I've seen some opinions in there talking about the quality of the games, which I can't actually find them. But some of the games this season that have not been on television have been great. You look at the Dundee Kilmarnock games, for example. Every one of them have been highly entertaining games. None of them were on the telly. Another one was the Motherwell Dundee game that was 3 each. Incident-packed occasions. So, all big games. Is that what Premier Sports need to do in terms of driving the market and to drum up more interest to get people buying subscriptions to want to watch it?
100%. They'll be hoping for plenty of action in terms of goals on the pitch, plenty of talking points, which Scottish football never fails to deliver on. So I think, as you say, they seem to be positioning themselves to be the leader when it comes to Scottish football. I think Sky have shown their hand that they're not going to do any more than they're already doing. I think you get a goal show maybe once a week that's not very well advertised, and then you get the televised games when they come out. So Premier Sports may just be manoeuvring themselves and say, look, we could actually run with this. Look at what BT done, actually. It was quite successful. We were sad to see it go, actually, but hopefully, Premier Sports can position themselves in a place where they can actually, as I say, elevate the game up a level and push us on.
Absolutely. And just quickly, before we touch on the other news from today, I just want to briefly mention, obviously, the BBC still retain their rights for the Scottish Championship and League One, respectively. Is that a deal you think we should be looking at improving as well? I know you get the Friday Championship games, which I must admit, to give the BBC some credit, has absolutely been, I think, fairly good. It's certainly added something to have that there. Where they do let it down a bit is some of the League One coverage, because you look at Inverness Hamilton in that playoff final for the Championship. That should have been in the BBC Scotland channel, but instead they packed it off to BBC Alba. So do you think maybe this coming along just now might spark them into maybe trying to improve their offering as well?
What do you mean, in terms of finances, or just mean in terms of how they package it up and present it
out? Well, a bit of both, but generally how they pack it up and present it out, and could they maybe look at, instead of just showing a Friday night Championship game every fortnight, maybe do they look at, can we maybe get the odd one on a Saturday afternoon, or that sort of thing? Can they package it up better, particularly with the League One stuff as well?
Listen, I like Friday night football. Really enjoy it. I like watching games under the lights, and it's a chance as well, because your team are playing on a Saturday or Sunday. It's a chance to look at someone else. I remember watching a Dunfermline game some months ago and been really surprised with the level of quality on the show as well. So they always seem to be at the game. They're always at the side of the pitch. McFadden's always usually involved. Leanne Crichton as well, who I think speaks really well, actually. So it's a difficult one, because I don't know how much is getting pumped in. Certainly, I think they deserve a bit more of the clubs themselves deserve more exposure. It's the only way you're gonna promote the SPFL. I'm like you, I don't like the games on Alba, primarily because I don't speak Gaelic, and I've never met a Scottish person in my puff who speaks Gaelic either. So maybe the guy that writes all the train station signs up in Scotland, he's probably the only guy. So no, in a serious note, I don't really buy into the Alba stuff. Actually, I was talking to a guy, fun enough, in my lads' football training last night. Obviously, I stay in England, and he said he was watching Spartans on BBC Alba against Dumbarton, and he had no idea what was going on. So it's not great from that side of things. So if it's all going to be on, even if it's just on iPlayer, but with the BBC Scotland coverage, I think that's a better footing to start with for all your football.
Well, absolutely. It's like I say, the Inverness Hamilton game for me, it was bizarre because that is a bit like the reason that Sky Sports show the Premiership playoff final, where BBC show the quarter-final and the semi. It's because that game gets classified as a Scottish Premiership game. Now, the same is said for that Championship playoff final. That's a Championship game. So, fundamentally, if you've got the rights to the Championship, why on earth aren't you showing that on BBC Scotland when BBC Scotland shows the Championship games? It's the way it should work, because that's what's, listen, Sky big boy, the BBC, when it comes to that, they go, listen, you have your quarter-final and your semi-final. We're having the big game, because that's the big gravy train for us, is to keep that. So, listen, it'll be interesting to see where it goes in the future. Certainly, any further updates or anything else that goes on in that, we will certainly bring to you on here. But, Robert, there is a little bit of managerial news.
Football stuff, proper football stuff, Connor.
Proper football stuff. We've mentioned the Edinburgh clubs, obviously, because they'll be a centrefold in the TV deal. But it seems as though Hibs have offered David Gray the managerial job on a permanent basis. First of all, what do you make of that?
Well, I've got to say, if that's the road that we're going to go down, I wonder why it's taking so long. But they may have looked at candidates and just thought, we can't get them through the door. Malky Mackay is obviously going to be above him. I think it's his fourth time he's been interim manager. I don't really know his credentials, to be honest, in terms of what he's going to do. You look at what happened with Barry Robson at Aberdeen, didn't really work out well. We'll see how it's going to work with Don Cowie as well. So I don't know. It's not one that, if I'm a Hibs fan, that would get me jumping off my seat. I think there was a lot of talk about Rhys McCabe maybe getting that job, whether it was to... Thanks very much, June. She's no relation, by the way. So I think it's very, very... what's the word? It's a predictable appointment, really. And I think maybe it's because they couldn't get anyone in who they fancied.
I mean, yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because like you see, he's had that interim appointment a few times. It's getting Barry Robson sort of feelings about it to me.
Is that in a good way or a bad way?
Well, I don't know. I think it depends how Hibs go about it, because I suppose the one thing you would say, Barry Robson, like David Gray, had a couple of interim stints in charge in between managers. What Barry Robson didn't have that David Gray does have is he didn't have an experienced sporting director sitting above him that can maybe help guide him, albeit the Hibs fans not really very happy when Malky Mackay was announced as a sporting director. But looking at it, why is it you think they didn't identify somebody as a better candidate? I mean, with no disrespect to David Gray, take his interim in charge out of the equation, but he's done okay in to give him his due. He is still a very inexperienced manager, and surely, Robert, Hibs next season, they've really got to be trying to compete for that third spot again, because the last 2 years they've been nowhere near it. I mean, last season, okay, they were in the top six, just. This season, dropped out of it completely. Ended up finishing, I believe it was 8th in the table. I mean, is David Gray the man to make them competitive again, particularly with Hearts? Because let's be fair, that's who they're competing with right now.
Listen, time will tell, but it's probably one of the most difficult jobs in Scottish football at the minute. You mentioned as well, why have they gone for David Gray? It may have been that dynamic of targets they've gone for, saying they don't want to work under that sort of structure and that sort of regime. I don't know, is Brian McDermott still going to be involved as well? So you're effectively working under under two more experienced guys. You've all got to agree on stuff. You've all got to work together. One's bringing in players, the other one's probably going to be leaning in and giving you advice in other matters as well. Malky Mackay's no fool when it comes to football. What he does off the park, I'm not going to comment on, but it's a very difficult one. He's got to get his recruitment right, David Gray, which is probably the hardest thing in football. They've lost two stalwarts in Lewis Stevenson and Paul Hanlon. They've gone to Raith Rovers. I see Marcondes has been released from Bournemouth today. Can they get him in? Because he was a real positive towards the end of the campaign as well. So time will tell. He's not going to get a lot of time. Hibs fans renowned for not suffering fools gladly. So if he doesn't start well, he's going to be under the cosh right from the off. I dare say Hibs will back him. They've got an increased budget, I believe, this summer, which he's probably going to need. But if it was me and I was Malky Mackay, Wolf there. If it was me and I was Malky Mackay, I'd have tried to bring in Kevin Thompson. I don't know why no one's touching Kevin Thompson. He done really well at Kelty, and he was being, I say, really championed at that point. And then he sort of gone on to get into this sort of football wilderness, and no one's gone near him, which I find really, really surprising. Young manager, big figure at Hibs, and I think he'd have been really worth a punt. Got great ideas. You hear him speaking on, he was on BT Sport or Premier. He's been on Premier Sports as well. He's been on Rangers TV, as we well know, and I think he speaks a good game. I think he just needs a chance, and I think Hibs fans would maybe be more forgiving with Kevin Thompson if things weren't going well in terms of giving a bit more time. But they've gone with David Gray, and as I say, he'll be under pressure right from the off. He's got the Premier Sports Cup ties to contend with, and I think for the Premiership teams, it's a thankless task the group stage, because if you get through, there's no pats on the back, and if you don't, you're under massive scrutiny before you've kicked the ball in the league.
Well, absolutely, and as you say, time will tell on that one. And obviously, Wolf, please comment there. And just to say, Wolf, I hope you are happy with the new graphic, because you did say a couple of weeks ago you wanted that Hearts badge to have a more prominent place. Well, it couldn't be more prominent. It is slap bang in the middle is there. So
can I just, I'd like to throw the gauntlet down to Wolf. I think Wolf should come on the podcast at some point next season, because he's been a real big contributor to the Scottish Football Show from outside the Rangers contingent since we started on here. So Wolf, get your thinking cap on it and come on during the season if you can, mate. It'd be good to chat with you.
Yeah, listen, absolutely. We'd be delighted to have you. You know how to get in contact with us if you want to come on. Right. That is that for this breaking news pod. As I said, we will endeavour across the summer any news that comes out, whether it's of a managerial situation or whether it's to do with the league in general. We'll certainly bring you all that news as and when we get it. The Rabble will be back tomorrow with the members show at 7:30, so don't miss that. And of course, if you're not already signed up as a member, there's still time to sign up and get in for that one. It's just $1.99, less than a cup of coffee. Like and subscribe, obviously, as well, if you enjoy what you're seeing. And of course, as well, just to quickly add, we will have some coverage over the course of the Euros as well for you. However long Scotland managed to stay in. But until then, my thanks to Robert for joining me for this impromptu show, and we will see you on the next one.